There we go. I botched. I botched a pinch. I changed things up. I usually grab songs off of YouTube, and I am not used to using Spotify at all. I just don't use Spotify because it seems like I don't know. I'm just not used to it. I probably should just get on the Spotify thing. Probably make my life easier if I want to drive and listen to music. It's better than dealing with free YouTube and all the nonsense. But anyway, how's it going, guys? This is a 15-page chapter tonight, so that will be two breaks to break this bad boy up. Excelente. So, 2 walls captured. We are now in the second phase of the conquest of Jerusalem here, right? We're getting into the weeds of the next level. As Rome closes in on the holy capital of all time and space. Inside the city, partisan fighters under Simon's command, not counting the Idumeans, numbered 10,000. Under 50 officers, with Simon as commander-in-chief. His Idumean allies were 5,000 strong, with 10 officers, of whom Jacob, son of Sosas, and Simon, son of Kathla, were the accepted leaders. John, after his seizure of the temple, had 6,000 fully armed men under 20 officers. Later, he was joined by the Zealots, who had laid aside their quarrel. These numbered 2,400, led by their old commander, Eleazar and Simon, son of Erinus. While these factions, as we said, were fighting... Hey, what's up, Nitwit? Walking the dog. Awesome. As we said, were fighting each other. The citizens were assailed from 2 directions at once, and those who would not be accessories to crime were plundered by both parties. Simon held the upper city and the Great Wall as far as the Kidron, with as much of the old wall as bent eastward from Siloam, and went down to the palace of Monobazus, king of the Adiabene, east of Euphrates. He also held the fountain and part of the citadel, or lower city, as far as the castle of Helena. Monobazus' mother, John, held the temple and much of the surrounding area with Ophel and the Kidron Valley. Everything that lay between them they burnt down to leave room for their fratricidal conflict. For even when the Romans were encamped close to the walls, the internal strife continued to rage. At the time of the first sortie, they had momentarily recovered their wits, but their frenzy had quickly returned to cooperation, was at an end, and the internal struggle was resumed as if their one desire was to play into the hands of the besiegers. They suffered nothing worse at Roman hands than they had endured at each other's. And when they had finished, there was nothing new left for the city to undergo. She went through the greater agony before she fell, and her destroyers accomplished something greater. I mean that her internal divisions destroyed the city, and the Romans destroyed the internal divisions, which were far more firmly established than her walls, and the misery of it all could reasonably be put down to her own people. The justice of it to the Romans, but everyone must interpret the facts in his own way. Whoops. Such being the state of affairs within the city, Titus, with some picked horsemen, rode round outside, looking for the best point for an assault on the walls, seeing no hope anywhere else, as where the valley ran anywhere else, as where the valley ran, there was no access, and elsewhere, the first wall seemed too solid for his engines. He decided to deliver his assault near the tomb of John the High Priest, for there, the first rampart was lower, and the second was not joined to it. Little trouble having been taken with the fortifications, where the new city was thinly populated, while it was easy to approach the third, through which he planned to invade the upper city, force his way through Antonia, and capture the temple. While he was riding, round an arrow struck one of his staff, Nicanor, in the left shoulder, as a result of his approaching too near with Josephus in an endeavor to put peace proposals before the sentries on the walls, who knew him well. This brought home to Caesar their determination, for they would not leave unmolested even those who came near to save them. It spurred him on to begin the siege, and he at once gave his infantry leave to devastate the suburbs, and ordered timber to be collected and platforms constructed, dividing his army into 3 sections. Till this work was done, he stationed the spearmen and archers between the platforms, and in front of these the quick-loaders, catapults, and stone-throwers, to prevent any enemy sorties directed against the works and any attempted interference from the wall. The felling of the trees at once stripped the suburbs bare, but the collection of the timber for the platforms and the concentration of the whole army on the work were accompanied by feverish activity on the Jewish side. Consequently, the citizens who had been at the mercy of the bandits and cutthroats now it looks like he meant to say recovered, but added an extra E in the spelling, so it looks like a typo. Cutthroats now recovered their spirits, confident that they would have a breathing space, while the enemy without kept their persecutions busy, and that they would be revenged on them if the Romans were victorious. John, however, though his men were eager to attack the Romans, was immobilized by fear of Simon. Simon, on the other hand, was active enough. Being nearer to the besiegers, he mounted his artillery along the wall, the weapons taken from Cestius earlier on, and those captured when they overwhelmed the defenders of Antonia. These, however, most of the men were unable to use owing to inexperience, but following instruction from deserters, a few managed to use their engines after a fashion, besides showering stones and arrows on the builders from the wall and dashing out in company strength to engage them hand to hand. The workmen were shielded from the missiles by wicker screens laid across palisades. While the artillery halted the sorties, the engines of all the legions were masterpieces of construction, but none were equal to those of the 10th. Their quick loaders were more powerful and their stone throwers bigger, so they could repulse not only the sorties but also the fighters on the wall. The stone missiles weighed half a hundred weight and traveled weight. Is 100 weight like that sounds like a poor translation of some unit of measurement, because I don't know what the hell that is. I've never heard that before, and not that I've heard every fucking kind of measurement, but so far I've heard of every other measurement that's used here. So anyway, the stone missiles weighed half a hundred weight and traveled 400 yards or more. No one who got in their way, whether in the front line or far behind, remained standing. At first the Jews kept watch for the stone. It was white, so that not only was it heard whizzing through the air, its shining surface could easily be seen. Lookouts posted on the towers gave them warning every time a stone was shot from the engine, came hurtling towards them by shouting, "Baby on the way." Um, baby on. Interesting. That's just like, that is not my imagination. When it was shot by the end. These are the lookouts posted on the towers. So this is what the Jews were shouting. They were calling these big stones and stuff baby, like baby on the way, like talking like street slang or something. Like, and probably the way baby would sound in I guess Aramaic or something would work as kind of like their kind of like street fighter kind of talk, maybe. That's kind of the impression that I get with all the context of the conduct of this alleged declining civilization. The Roman counter was to blacken the stone, as it could not then be seen so easily. They hit their target, destroying many with a single shot. But in spite of their casualties, the Jews did not allow the Romans to raise their platforms in safety. Every device of inventiveness and daring was called into play as they fought night and day to keep them out. Right? So, like, they're working on, like, so, like, the walls of Jerusalem are challenging the Romans' conventional manners in which they would design, engineer, and apply their siege engines, right? So there was certainly this kingdom, when it had whatever kings lived here and built these structures, obviously were quality engineers with a quality military regiment, right? And we're talking about like the turn of the era as Christianity is kind of in its first generation or so. And while Christianity is in this first generation, you've got this kingdom of Israel like not holding itself together well, even without the Romans, and perhaps less so without the Romans, meaning that they're already they're more of a corpse of a nation. So they're, this is that they exist by incorporation with the trust of the Roman Empire, right? So the Roman Empire basically acts as the primary shareholder who enforces the laws that in which their obligation of the portion of the share is made, right? So this is your tax tithe, and this is your stop resisting. You're all in this with them because it's either our empire or that kingdom over there starts an empire, and then we're going to have to throw down. So we'd rather throw down with you than have to throw down with a kingdom with imperial ambitions. And this is why we have a contentious relationship with all indigenous populations, right? Do people want to, nobody wants to give, like, Finnish ancestors too much fucking shit about what happened to the Sami. Not too much, but there's some context in history to say, that's some shit. Right? And so there's always that stuff going on, right? It's like how you reconcile any conspiracy going on at the top with the empathy for the pain and the suffering that is legitimate on the bottom. And if you are trying to not wrap your head completely around what's happening at the top, you'll just be lost in the sauce, waiting for someone else to solve the problem. But because you've probably lost that faith, you can't think about it anymore. And because all you know is that the people you care about the most are dying at the hands of other aggressors, and there should not be aggressors in the world. And nobody could possibly be lying about any aspect of my worldview. Right? And then the problem is people don't want to admit that partial understanding of their world may be paltered. Paltering is when you tell a half-truth in a story. And I think it's not a mistake that also Palantir is kind of close to Palter. It's got Palter in the name, Palantir, this seeing stone, right? So that's the corruption of the Palantir, is that it is giving you a half-truth, which is why it's more dangerous than not, which is also part of the example of the innocence of the hobbits protected the group from the spying eye of Sauron, right? And this is, how Tolkien seeds in mythological ideas to give you archetypal concepts of what a hobbit is racially to the ecosystem of Middle-earth, right? Which includes the fate of Gollum as well, who is a ancestor of hobbits that was corrupted by Sauron's full influence. But also, that corruption made him of such inferior power and such personal selfishness that he also was able to keep the ring safe until the right person forced him to lose it. And that is the beautifully demonstrated unconscious redemption arc of Gollum, and why we all cried when that evil son of a bitch died. Because everybody understood the pain of addiction that he was going through. Okay. While the artilleries halted the sorties, the engines of all the legions were masterpieces of construction, but none were equal to those of the 10th. Their quick loaders were more powerful and their stone throwers bigger, so they could repulse not only the sorties, but also the fighters on the wall. The stone missiles weighed half a hundredweight and traveled 400 yards more. No one got in their way, whether in the front line or far behind. Remained standing. Am I being silly? No. Blackened stone. Once I saw that weird word, I said to myself, I'm in the wrong spot. Flow state, my friends. Flow state. When the work were finished, the engineers measured the distance to the wall by throwing lead and line from the platforms. Also, one more thing, because I can get absent. Okay, this is only page 3. Okay, cool. To the wall by throwing lead and line from the platforms. No other way was possible under the barrage from above. Then they found that the batterers could reach it. They brought them up. Titus next posted his artillery nearer to prevent the Jews from keeping the rams away and ordered the battering to begin. From 3 sides, a frightful din suddenly resounded round the city. A shout went up from those within, and the partisans were as terrified as the rest. Both parties, seeing the common danger, realized at last that they must make a common defense. The rivals shouted across to each other, each that they were giving the enemy every possible assistance, when the right thing, even if God did not give them permanent concord, was for the moment at any rate to set aside their mutual animosities and unite against the Romans. Simon then announced that everyone was free to proceed from the temple to the wall, and John gave his permission, though suspicious of Simon. Hatred and private differences utterly forgotten, they became one body, and manning the wall, they flung firebrands by the hundreds against the engines, and showering weapons continuously on the men, shoving the batterers. The bolder spirits sprang forward in tight groups, tore to pieces the screens over the engines, and falling on the crews overpowered them, not so much by skill as by reckless courage. The help to those in difficulty, Titus himself never failed to come. He placed the cavalry and bowmen on either side of the engines, beat off their fire throwers, repulsed those who were hurling missiles from the towers, and got the batterers into action. Yet the wall did not give way under the blows, except that of the 15th Legion. The 15th Legion's ram knocked away the corner of a tower. The wall itself was undamaged. It was not in the same immediate danger as the tower, which projected a long way and could not easily involve the collapse of any part of the actual rampart. Suspending their sorties for a while, the Jews kept watch on the Romans who had scattered to their tasks and about the camps under their impressions, and that the defenders had withdrawn through exhaustion and terror. Suddenly they poured them out en masse by a hidden gate near the Tower Hippicus. Armed with brands to set fire to the works and bent on reaching the Roman fortifications, at their shouts, the front-line troops manned their posts, and the supporters came running up. But the reckless courage of the Jews was too quick for the solid defense of the Romans. They routed their foremost opponents and swept on to attack the reserves. A furious battle was joined round the engines, one side straining every nerve to set them on fire, the other to prevent it. A babel of sounds arose from both, and many of those in the forefront were killed. The Jews were gaining the advantage through sheer desperation. The works were catching fire and were in danger of being completely destroyed. Engines and all had not the picked troops from Alexandria, with few exceptions, stood fast, surpassing their own reputations for gallantry. For in this battle they put more famous legions in the shade. At last Caesar brought up the flower of his cavalry and charged the enemy. 12 of the leading Jews he killed with his right hand. Their fate broke the resistance of the rest. Titus followed, drove them in a body into the city, and saved the works from the flames. It happened that in this battle one of the Jews was taken alive. Titus ordered him to be crucified before the walls, hoping that the sight would terrify the rest into surrender. After the withdrawal, John, the Idumean leader, was talking to a soldier of his acquaintance before the wall when he was struck in the breast by an Arab arrow and died instantly. A terrible shock to the Idumeans and grief to the insurgents for his prowess and ability were both outstanding. Okay. The next night, the Romans were thrown into confusion by a surprising occurrence. Titus had ordered the construction of 3 towers, 75 feet high, to be set up on the 3 platforms so that from them he might bombard the defenders on the wall. But in the middle of the night, one of these fell down spontaneously within the tremendous crash, causing the panic in the army. Convinced that an attack was imminent, all rushed for their weapons, and wild confusion seized the legions, as no one could say what had occurred. They scattered in all directions with the cries of anguish, and when no enemy appeared, they grew scared of each other, and everyone anxiously asked his neighbor for the password, as if the Jews had broken into their camps. They were like men in the grip of a panic fear, till, learning what had occurred, Titus ordered it to be explained to them all, and at long last they recovered from their confusion. The Jews stood up obstinately to every other form of attack, but were in great difficulty from the towers. From them they were pelted by the lighter engines and by the spearmen, archers, and stone throwers. On their lofty perch these men were beyond the reach of Jewish weapons, and there was no way to capture the towers, which were difficult to overturn because of their weight and could not be set alight because of the iron that encased them. So they withdrew out of range, abandoning the attempt to hold off the assaults of the Romans, which, by their incessant blows, were little by little affecting their purpose. Already the wall was giving way before Victor, for so the Jews nicknamed the biggest Roman batterer as being victorious over everything, and they had long been worn out by fighting and sentry go and night duty far from the city. Besides, through laziness and their habit of deciding wrongly, they thought it a waste of effort to defend this wall, as there remained 2 more Romans behind it. Most of them slacked off and retired, and when the Romans climbed through the breach made by Victor, they all left their posts and ran helter-skelter. Wait a minute. What? What? 2? Did I read that right? Okay. Big Roman victorious over everything, and they had long been worn out by fighting. Besides the laziness of their habit, they decided wrong waste effort to defend the wall. There remained 2 more behind it. Like 2 more, like battle crew, or just 2 more guys? The biggest or they meant the batterers, or like battering teams. And they're incessantly giving way before Victor, so the Jews nicknamed the biggest Roman batterer as being victorious over everything. All right, well, at any rate, that's kind of crazy. Like, you see how crazy that is? Like, it's like the protesters. It's like their conviction isn't there. There's no conviction behind it. It's just raw nerves. It's all just raw nerves. Most of them slacked off and retired, and when the Romans climbed through the breach made by Victor, they all left their posts and ran helter-skelter to the second wall. It's so Attack on Titan in many respects. That's what's funny about it. Those who had broken through then opened the gates and let in the whole army, having thus mastered the first wall on the 15th day of the siege, the 7th of Artemisios. The Romans demolished a large part of it, together with the northern suburbs of the city, so recently destroyed by Cestius. Titus now accommodated his troops within the first wall in the traditional camp of the Assyrians, occupying all the intervening ground as far as the Kidron, but out of the bow shot from the second wall, and at once began the probing attack. Dividing their forces, the Jews kept up an obstinate defense from the wall, John's men fighting from Antonia and the northern colonnade of the temple, and before the tomb of King Alexander, Simon's brigade occupying the approach near the tomb of John, the high priest, and defending the ground as far as the gate by which water was brought into the Hippicus Tower. Over and over again, they sprang out from the gates and fought at close quarters, and though chased back to the wall and worsted in these hand-to-hand struggles, being far less skilled than the Romans, they scored in the wall fighting. The Romans were upheld by the combination of strength with experience, the Jews by reckless courage, nourished by fear, and by their characteristic obstinacy amid disasters, and they still had hopes of survival, as the Romans had of a quick victory. Neither side showed any sign of flagging assaults, wall fighting, sorties at company strength went on continuously all day long. No method of attack was left untried. Dusk hardly availed to break off the battles begun at dawn, and there was no sleep for either side. Indeed, the night was less endurable than the day. The Jews, expecting every moment the capture, expecting any moment would have been the proper word, capture of the wall. The Romans, an assault on their camps, both passed the night in arms, yet the first glimmer of dawn found them ready for battle. Among the Jews, the great ambition was to show outstanding courage and earn the gratitude of their officers. Simon was held in special respect and awe, and so devoted to him was every man under his command that none would have hesitated a moment to kill himself at Simon's bidding. That's insane levels of like loyalty stuff, right? You got to be careful if you've got a level of order follower that'll slit his own throat for you. You don't let that guy keep going, and you move quickly to stop him, and you don't tell him, because he will. Yeah, he's got like that's a gang. That's like how gangs operate. With absolutely no soul, no morality, because they are so fixated on a delusional ideology, radical zealot, and it works very well if you've got a big existential, spiritual behind the veil battle against good and evil narrative controlling your mind. Simon was held in special respect and awe, and so devoted to him was ever. Okay, then they kill themselves. With the Romans, the great inducement to valor were the habits of victory and unfamiliarity with defeat, their constant campaigning and uninterrupted training, and the greatness of the empire. Above all, the fact that always in every place, by every man, stood Titus, to show weakness when Caesar was there. Fighting at their side was unthinkable, while the man who fought valiantly did so before the eyes of the one who would reward him. Indeed, he was paid already if Caesar had recognized his courage. As a result, many showed courage beyond their strength through the sheer enthusiasm. Here is an instance. On one of those days, the Jews were drawn up before the wall in force, and the opposing lines were still exchanging spears at long range. Suddenly, Longinus, a cavalryman. Longinus is his name. Is this the same Longinus from the Gospel? Because that's why it's called the Lance of Longinus. Leaped out of the Roman ranks and charged the very middle of the Jewish phalanx. Scattered. Oh, and by the way, Longinus is covering, because who stole the All-Father, right? And Odin spears himself upon Yggdrasil, right? But the inversion through Christ is that Christ did not have the power to take his own life. He would not take control of his life. He left his life to fate. Odin didn't run from death. Once he knew it was inevitable, he said, "This is it. Let us end this. Let us get this over with." Right? Where are we here? Caesar's recognizes courage. As a result, many show courage beyond their strength through sheer enthusiasm. Here is an instance. On one of these days, the Jews were drawn up before the wall in force, and the opposing lines were still exchanging spears at long range. Suddenly, Longinus, a cavalryman, leapt out of the Roman ranks and charged the very middle of the Jewish phalanx. Scattered them by his onslaught, he killed 2 of the most stalwart, striking one in the face as he came to meet him, withdrawing the spear and transfixing the other through the side as he turned away. We will continue the rest of this passage and the rest of this story for the next 5 pages on the other side of the break. So take a little breather here. Let me see if I can do things right. I wanted to run with a classic tonight. So I want you guys to enjoy. Oops, I have to. Which one was it? Oops, I thought I had it clicked on. Yeah. So enjoy Arrival. Some good old King Diamond. Great. There we go. The classics. Gotta love the classics. All right, we got 5 more pages. I find it amusing that all of these names that may in fact be the same characters in the Bible are all here in history. Oh, look at them here. They existed in history, right? I'm not saying that they didn't, right? But, this is, it's always to contextualize that Josephus was a politician that was doing historian stuff, right? Writing about the records of his testimony of things. Then, back from the middle of the enemy, he ran to his own lines unscathed. When he had given the demonstration of prowess, there were many who imitated his valor. The Jews, on their side, heedless of the damage they suffered, were concerned only with what they could inflict, and death had no terrors for them if only it fell on one of the enemy too. But Titus wasn't anxious for the safety of his men as for victory itself. He declared that incautious enthusiasm was utter madness, and heroism was heroic only when it went with prudent regard for the hero's own safety. His men were forbidden to risk their own lives in order to display their fearlessness. He's trying to keep things in check because, the gusto of young men, the arrogance that can come over them, the psychology of the culture at the time, especially for the war culture as such, that's going to be something that you're going to want to do. It's, it's kind of the same thing with the reason why they kind of complain in football about, like, how much you showboat on a touchdown, right? Like, they don't want you doing the most absurd of dances and things of this nature. He now brought up the batterer against the middle tower of the north wall. There, a cunning Jew named Castor lay in ambush with 10 others like himself. Remind you, this is why in that prior, like a couple of chapters ago, there was that whole story about how this whole crew had to freaking make a big argument about, like, why they don't deserve to be punished in this circumstance, with the exception of these people that were involved in this operation, because that they don't reflect on us as such, because we didn't know what was going on that side of the battle at the moment that decision was made, right? And so they made a persuasive argument, and they limited the punishment to just a top few responsible, because not that they reduced any standards, but that they proved that they met the standards that already existed. No controversy. Not an argument. Right? So there's no question that everything is going by the books on the Roman side of the situation. This is also showing you that it's one of the things that shows why they, in theory, are the civilized ones, the civilization, right? Where you're looking at the juxtaposition to the wild madness of the internal civil war in Israel that is making, like, these rational, I suppose the theory is that they're freedom-loving Jews are begging the Romans to come in, right? And this is just, it's just, and all you're getting out of this is third world country behavior, with the exception of the people that want the Romans there. So here's my question: if that's the case in the Middle East as a whole, look at the scale of the Middle East now, that whole region. just look at Israel and Palestine as one thing already, and they're just wiping out where there are difficult factions, just like they're doing in real time in this book. But now that is the scale of, because the scale is different, because the world is smaller now. Populations are bigger and the world is smaller. So that, what's happening to Israel as a whole right now is what's happening to Jerusalem in the book right now. And the rest of the Middle Eastern region over the last 25 years is what has been happening in the book up to this fucking point, you see. You get it? History repeats itself, because this is the path of the Ouroboros. This is the path of destruction and inferior resurrection. You come back poorer every single time. By the descriptions of the temple in this book, something engineered by the same people that engineered things like the pyramids was destroyed. Which I think is what's about to happen in by the end of this book or something. But they had to have a big war about it instead of just surrendering and preserving something special that told us the story about ourselves, because our story about ourselves gets more and more convoluted. And now we have our ideas about the Middle East, our ideas about Hebrew people and their legacy, and we have it paltered. Like I mentioned before, it's completely paltered. And, you know, this war, what's happening right now with these walls, this is the kingdom's tower moment. Right? So this is explaining a tower card situation by the time we get to the temple itself. We now brought up the batterer against the middle tower of the north wall. There, a cunning Jew named Castor lay in ambush with 10 others like himself, the rest having withdrawn to escape the arrows. These, for a time, kept quiet, crouching behind the parapet, but when the tower began to disintegrate, they stood up, and Castor, holding out his hands as if in supplication, called on Caesar and in heart-rending tones besought him to pity them. Guileless himself, Titus believed him, and hoping that the Jews had at last come to their senses, stopped the ram, allowed no arrows to be aimed at the suppliants, and invited Castor to state his wishes. When he replied that he would like to come down under a guarantee of impunity, Titus expressed delight at his good sense. He was still more delighted if everyone felt the same, and gladly gave the city his word. Of the 10 men, 5 pretended to join in Castor's supplication, but the rest loudly protested that they would never be slaves of the Romans, while they could die as free men. During the long wrangle that followed, the assault was held up, and Castor sent to Simon, bidding him to take his time in deciding the necessary steps, as he could delude the Roman command indefinitely. At the same time as he sent this message, he made it appear that he was urging the objectors to accept the guarantee. They made a show of indignation, brandishing their naked swords above the parapet, then struck their own breastplates and fell down as if run through. Titus and his staff were dumbfounded at the extraordinary courage of the men, and being unable to see from below just what had happened, admired their fortitude and pitied their misfortune. At this point, someone shot an arrow and hit Castor at the side of his nose. He at once drew it out and showed it to Titus, complaining of unfair treatment. That sounds funny. It's just so wait, like an arrow like flung by hit him in the nose? And did he just like have just like an arrow sticking out of his nose? He just walks up to the boss and pulls it out. You see what I'm talking about? Like, this is his reaction? Not medic! This is unfair. The war. You're potentially going to genocide these people. They're pretty bent on defending their entire not wanting you in their fucking lives situation. Reprimanding the archer, Caesar deputed Josephus, who was standing by to convey the guarantee to Castor and shake hands on it. But Josephus refused to go himself, since the petitioners meant no good, and restrained those of his friends who were anxious to take his place. However, Aeneas, one of the deserters, said he would go, and when Castor called for someone to receive the money that he had with him, Aeneas spread out his garments to catch it and ran towards him more eagerly. Castor promptly picked up a huge stone and flung it at him. Aeneas dodged out of the way, but it injured another soldier who had come forward. When Caesar saw how he had been tricked, he realized that it was fatal to show pity in war. Sterner measures gave the trickster less opportunity. Furious that he had been fooled, he stepped up the assault of the batterer. As the tower was on the point of collapse, Castor and his men set fire to it, and leaping through the blaze into the vault beneath, again gave the Romans the impression of fortitude by apparently flinging himself into the fire. Caesar captured... Caesar captured the wall at this point 4 days after capturing the first, and as the Jews had retired from it, he entered with 1,000 heavy infantry and his special bodyguard. In that part of the new city where the wool shops, forges, and cloth markets were, and the streets ran slantwise to the wall, if he had without hesitation demolished a longer stretch of the wall, or after entering had by right of conquest sacked what he had taken, his victory would not, I think, have been cancelled out by a reverse, as it was hoping to shame the Jews by waiving his right to do them hurt. He refrained from widening the breach to ensure an easy retreat. He never imagined they would repay his kindness with treachery. So after his entry, he forbade his men to kill any prisoners or set the houses on fire. The partisans, he informed, that if they wished to fight without harming the citizens, they were free to march out. To the citizens, he promised the return of their property, for his chief concern was to preserve the city for himself and the temple for the city. Okay, so here's an establishment of trying to say that, like, listen, straight up orders. I'm trying to say that I only will hurt you if you resist. You know, we've done quite enough. You know that. You know, this is not about wiping you guys out. So on and so forth, right? So that's a question of is this kind of making a statement about ideas of like, maybe nobody wants to be conquered by you because when it gets like this, with people we don't like fighting you, you then go kill everybody behind those effing people. Like all you fucking people do, right? And like, so this is like the Jews being angry at the way pagans do things, because it wasn't just the Romans that did this. It's just like Viking raiders did this. It's in the fucking Northmen. You're rooting for a guy that was participating in the, you know, the slave trade after raids for getting the slaves, that on what it was, and as dark as it was, and all of that was legitimate. Caesar captured the wall at this point, 4 days after capturing the first, and the Jews had retired from it. He entered with 1,000 heavy infantry and his special bodyguard in the part of the new city where the wool shops, forges, and cloth markets were, and the streets ran slantwise to the wall. If he had without hesitation demolished a longer stretch of the wall, or after entering had by right of conquest sacked what he had taken, his victory would not, I think, have been cancelled out by a reverse, as it was, hoping to shame the Jews by waiving his right to do them hurt. He refrained from widening the breach to ensure an easy retreat. He never imagined they would repay his kindness with treachery. So after his entry, he forbade his men to kill any prisoners or set houses on fire. Partisans he informed that if they wish to fight without harming citizens, they're free to march in the streets. I'm sorry I'm reading this all again. I just realized again. But it's good to kind of repeat these things sometimes too. So that's a happy accident. As you know, I confuse myself with my own interdictions that are part of the charm of this broadcast presentation. The partisans he informed that if they wished to fight without harming citizens, free to do so. The citizens he promised to return their property. The chief was concerned was to preserve the city and the temple. The people had been ready from the first to accept his demands, but the war party took humanity for weakness and imagined that it was through inability to take the rest of the city that Titus made these offers, threatening the townsfolk with death if there was any suggestion of surrender, and murdering all who mentioned the word peace. They attacked the Romans inside the wall, some pouncing on them in the narrow streets, some from the houses, while others made a dash outside the wall from the upper gates. In hopeless confusion, the guards on the wall jumped down from the towers and withdrew to their camps. The clamor arose from those within, completely encircled by the enemy, and from those without, in fear for those left behind. The Jews, every minute more numerous and at a great advantage through familiarity with the streets, wounded many, and by relentless pressure forced them toward the exit. They, having no other choice, continued to resist, for it was impossible to escape in a body through the narrow gap in the wall. It is probable that all who had entered the city would have been cut to pieces had not Titus come to the rescue. Placing his bowmen at the ends of the street and taking his own stand where the enemy were thickest, he stopped their advance with his arrows. Aided by Domitius Sabinus, who in this battle again showed his worth. Firm as a rock, Caesar kept up a constant stream of arrows and pinned down the Jews till all his men had got clear. Right, so it's kind of like, you fucked up your ambush. You got your prey into the trap, and you didn't set the trap pressure properly, and you missed, because you kind of smacked him in the face instead of stabbed him in the heart, and all you did was make him mad. That's all you did. I don't even think they lost a guy. Seems like nobody got hurt. Or so little it's not worth mentioning. Thus the Romans, after capturing the second wall, were driven out again. The war party in Jerusalem were elated, carried away by their success, and convinced that if the Romans ever did venture to set foot in the city again, they were doomed to defeat. For God was blinding their eyes because of their transgressions, and they saw neither the strength of the remaining Roman foes. So so they're not saying that the Romans went back on their word. So it sounds like they took care of whoever was going to fucking fight them, and then they still honored everyone who chose not to fight, which is the right move. So, because it's in honor. So much more numerous than those they had ejected, nor the famine that was creeping towards them. It was still possible to feed on the public miseries and drink the city's lifeblood, though want had long been assailing. Honest men, for lack of necessities, many were at death's door. But the destruction of the people the partisans welcomed, it left more of them. The only people who, in their opinion, deserved to survive were those who had no use for peace and only lived to defeat the Romans. The masses who opposed them were a mere drag, and they were glad to see them go. You know, like when you think about all the backstabbing and stuff going on in the region, right? Why would you? Let's just say that although there's going to be a change of the guard, and like the Jews that used to be there where you understood what you were dealing with because it was a different kind of nation. It falls, and then it doesn't come back. Those people get wiped out fighting to regain control of various cities, which establishes them as the king head of the land, right? The appointed lord of those lands. And that legacy would turn into something like House Harkonnen in there, because you're letting these, because it would have been like these ultra dark, brutal, backstabby guys known as zealots and doing all these crazy things. And then they're out there putting, they might be putting something really useful into the world, but that useful thing would be useful for people that they corrupt into their ideals because of the stuff they make that is most supportive of the shape of their nation. And so this is like kind of like the framework for why your nation, from your point of view in the world, has a certain attitude towards another nation, right? This is, this is why there's special treatments with various complicated hostilities that are not about resources. Resources are naturally an economic factor, but there's all sorts of spiritual ideals behind all sorts of things happening with people. And sometimes those spiritual ideals are not necessarily in a religion. And you have to kind of get a deeper look at what really matters on a human level to people, right? This is why these 2 seasons of Andor that apparently is all we're going to fucking get thanks to Disney sucking at other live streaming services, is such an amazing show, is because it puts you right in the fucking bedroom of characters. Puts you right into life in between the fighting. And really showing you what's at stake. Really showing you what the motivation under the Emperor. You get the motivations of the Emperor, but you only get that because in that hero's journey, it's looking at it from the Jedi level point of view. You're getting this, you're seeing what it looks like without people who know any Force mythos, where the Force has fucking zero disturbed presence, right? We haven't seen one Force-sensitive character. I think maybe some comment about kyber crystals, which are used in lightsabers, which are also used in the primary weapon of the Death Star. Oh, man. Anyway, such was their attitude to those within the walls. The Romans, when they again tried to break in, they held up by filling the breach and walling it up with their bodies. For 3 days they stood their ground, resisting with the utmost determination. But on the 4th, Titus delivered a violent onslaught, which overcame their defense and forced them to retire as before. Once more in possession of the wall, he at once threw down the northern stretch from end to end, and placing garrisons in the towers on the portion towards the south, began to plan the assault on the third wall. He now resolved to suspend the siege for a time and so afford the partisans an interval for deliberation, in the hope that they would be inclined to surrender in view of the demolition of the second wall or through fear of starvation. For plunder would not keep them going for long. This interval he turned to his own advantage as follows. When the soldiers' payday arrived, he ordered the officers to parade their troops in full view of the enemy and there count out the money to each man. In accordance with the custom, the soldiers removed from their armor the protective coverings and advanced in full panoply. The horsemen, leading their charges, decked in all their trappings, every yard of ground before the city shone with silver and gold, a spectacle that filled the Romans with delight, their enemies with terror. The spectators crowded the whole length of the old wall and the north side of the temple, and behind the wall eyes could be seen peering from every window. Nowhere in the city was there an inch of ground not hidden by the crowds. Utter consternation seized when the boldest... Hold on a second. Oops. Peering through the windows. Under consternation seized even the boldest when they saw the entire army assembled. The splendor of their armor and the perfect discipline of the men. I have little doubt that at this sight the partisans would have abandoned their stand had not the limitless mischief they had done to the citizens destroyed all hope of pardon by the Romans, right? Now, this is part and parcel of a certain level of lesson, right? It's like if you are somebody who would want to be a warrior as part of a team, right? Like being a soldier of rank and file talent, right? It's beautiful to love freedom, but that love of freedom also has certain consequences for not being partial to certain things, right? You have a personal responsibility to have a couple of basics. I'll give you a nerdy answer, right? In Dungeons and Dragons, your character gets 6 primary attributes for physical and mental potential, and the baseline for that is 10. Any lower than 10, you get negative bits. You want to have a character that sits at 10 almost nowhere. You want to get to a place in life where everything gives you a little bit of a boost. And then you have a couple of things that you really love, and you put all of your experience into making that stronger, right? Do you go for strength? Do you go for intelligence? Do you not care that much about being charming, popular, or a leader, etc., etc. Death by torture awaited them if they turned back now. Death in battle was greatly to be preferred. Fate, too, ordained that with the guilty should perish the innocent, and with the warring factions the entire city. In 4 days, the Romans completed the payment of all the legions on the 5th, as no request for peace came from the Jews. Titus divided his legions into 2 groups and began building platforms in front of Antonia and the tomb of John, planning to invade the upper city at the tomb and the temple via Antonia. If the temple was not taken, not even possession of the town would be secure. At each of these points, work on 2 platforms was begun, every legion being responsible for one. The men working alongside the tomb were hindered by the Idumeans and Simon's infantry, who had surprised sorties, those before Antonia by John's men and the zealot groups. These attackers had the advantage, not only with their hand-thrown missiles, which they threw from a greater height, but also because they had now learnt to use their engines for daily practice, had steadily increased their skill. They had 300 quick loaders and 40 stone throwers, enabling them to make work on the Roman platforms. So the thing went on so long, like straight up dudes leveled up. Straight up, like, dudes got lots of practice in through this whole ordeal. So now they have guys that are very good at this kind of warfare. So the Romans made their adaptabilities. They were passionate about upgrading, right? This is the fun of the game for them. Especially with so few casualties, right? Difficult. Titus knew that the survival or destruction of the city mattered very much to himself. So while he prosecuted the siege, he did not fail to urge the Jews to reverse their policy, combining military activity with good advice. Knowing, too, that very often the sword is less effective than the tongue, he called on them repeatedly to save themselves by handing over the city. Virtually his already, and sent Josephus to talk to them in their own language, thinking they would perhaps yield to the persuasions of a fellow countryman. Josephus circled the wall, striving to keep out of range but within hearing, and appealing to them again and again to spare themselves and their people, their country and their temple, and not to show themselves more indifferent than were foreigners. The Romans, who had no share in them, respected their enemies' holy places, and till now had kept their hands off them, while those who had been brought up in them, and if they survived would not alone possess them, were doing their best to destroy them. Did they not see their strongest walls lying flat, and only the weakest one still standing? Now it's a question of, is this the way it's going down? Like, they are responsible for the destruction of their own temple during the war, or is this a twist by Josephus to make Rome look innocent, right? He's going to paint a picture that makes Rome look good, naturally. Could be the truth, could not be the truth. Josephus will likely be a paltering sort of person. It's just the nature of politicians. Did they not know that the might of Rome was invincible and submission to her an everyday experience? If it indeed was right to fight for freedom, they should have done so at the start. Once they had been crushed and had submitted for many years, to try then to shake off the yoke was to show not a love of freedom, but a morbid desire for death. It might well be reasonable to disdain meaner masters, but not the lords of the whole world. What corner of the earth had escaped the Romans unless heat or cold made it of no value to them? What are we talking about? South Africa, Northern Europe, Northern Asia. Romans are not that keen on being away from the Mediterranean weather. As one who's half Italian, my hardware is more Italian. I psychologically love the winter. I may even emotionally love the winter. But my body needs to have sufficient warmth in it. I'm far more comfortable on the hotter days. Anyway, from every side, fortune had passed them, and God, who handed dominion over from nation to nation round the world, abode now in Italy. It was an immutable and unchallenged law among the beasts and men alike that all must submit to the stronger, and that the power belonged to those supreme in arms. That was why their ancestors, in soul and body and in resources far superior to themselves, had submitted to Rome, which they could not have borne to do if they had not known that God was on the Roman side. As for themselves, what gave them confidence to hold out when most of the city was already captured, and those inside, even if the walls were still standing, were far worse off than if the city had fallen? The Romans were well aware of the famine within, which was now destroying the civilian population and would soon destroy the fighting men as well, even if the Romans suspended operations and made no armed assault on the city. Yet a war there was no resisting, was raging in their midst and growing every hour, unless they could take arms and fight against famine itself, and alone among men master even hunger. They had better change their way. He went on before it was too late and veer to a safer course while they could. The Romans would bear them no grudge for their past folly unless they brazened it out to the end. They were by nature merciful in victory, and they were allowed bitter feelings to stand in the way of their interests, which would not be served by having the city uninhabited or the country desolate. And so Caesar was ready even now to offer them guarantees, but he would not spare a single man if he took the city by storm. Least of all, if even at their last gasp they turned down his offer. That the third wall would be quickly captured was evident from the capture of the other two. Even if the barrier defied attack, hunger would fight for the Romans and against them. Give me 1 second here, because it was that 302, right? So 1, 2, 5. Okay, that's fine. All right, we're going to pause right here then, and this is the next break. I may have to pick another song. I feel like I need another break to get through like I did the math wrong or something. All right, so I decided to go with the Origin album by Omnium Gatherum. Which song was it that I took? Just 1 second. I think it was Paragon. We're going to do Paragon. was on key. What's good? All right, Zerilath here, and I was right. So that was the last break. We got about, I'd say, probably 4 pages left because of how deep I cut into the first page here. So we're going to jump right back into it. And, oh, thank you, Nitwig. Good to see that you're still here. These appeals of Josephus were received by the defenders generally with howls of derision or execration, sometimes with the showers of stones, as frank advice was lost on them. He turned to the story of the nation's past. You wretched people. I'm sorry, 1 second. You. Okay. You wretched people, he cried. You forgot your real allies. Are you fighting the Romans with the weapons and your own right hand? Who else have we defeated in that way? And when did God, our Creator, fail to avenge our wrongs? Turn round and look at the place you are setting out from to fight, and think how powerful an ally you have grossly insulted. Have you forgotten the miraculous achievement of your fathers and the terrible wars this place has won for you in days gone by? For my part, I shudder to recall the works of God in your unworthy hearings. Listen all the same and realize that you are fighting not only the Romans, but God as well. Think about that. Think about telling a Jew that. Like the way that America fucking says it. But of course America never fucking, criticizes what Israel's fucking doing. Right? And, I don't know what words here Josephus used in his translation. Is he implying, like, Jehovah? Because we'd be talking about turning Jove into Jehovah to make the correlation. If the Romans are going to sit there and argue peace with them by invoking their God. It's a very interesting argument that Josephus is claiming went down this particular way. Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt at the time, descended on this land with an immense army and seized Sarah the princess, mother of our nation. What? Holy shit. Egypt just comes out of fucking flank when the Romans have fucking conquered the city? Like, for reals? Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt at the time, descended on this land with an immense army and seized Sarah the princess, mother of our nation. And what did her husband, our forefather Abraham, do? Did he avenge the insult by force of arms? Yet he had 318 officers under him, with unlimited manpower at their disposal. Did he not regard them as valueless without help of God, and stretch out clean hands towards the place you now have desecrated, enlisting the Almighty as his helper? Some of this stuff is fun to read, I ain't gonna lie. Wait a minute, where'd I go? Down here? Don't skip it. I think that's the bottom of the page. Blood shaken, terrible. No. Sarah Princess, Abraham. I got it. Hold on. Yet he had 318 officers under him with unlimited manpower at their disposal. Did he not regard them as valueless without the help of God, and stretch out clean hands towards the place you now have desecrated, enlisting the Almighty as his helper? Wasn't the queen sent back to her husband the very next evening, unsullied, while the Egyptian... Unsullied? Do we mean this in the same context as Game of Thrones? So they were not castrati? while the Egyptians reverenced the place stained by you with your countrymen's blood and shaken by terrible dreams. In the night fled, showering silver and gold on God's beloved Hebrews. Let's get the annotation on this one. Where did Josephus find this fantastic story? Not in Holy Writ. Now, this translation was made, I believe, before the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and maybe that's in the Dead Sea Scrolls or something. I don't remember all the details of this Essene-connected document. Need I speak of our fathers' sojourn in Egypt? They were crushed and subject to foreign rulers for 400 years, but though they might have resisted with weapons and their own right hand, they committed their cause to God. Who has not heard of Egypt, overrun with every wild beast and wasted by every disease, the barren land, the shrunken Nile, the 10 plagues in swift succession, and the consequent departure of our fathers, sent on their way with no bloodshed and no danger, led forth by God to establish his temple worship? Again, when the Syrians carried off our sacred ark, did not Philistia and Dagon the idol, did not the whole nation of plunderers rue the day? Interesting that he's bringing all this up. Their hidden parts suppurating, their bowels prolapsed, they brought it back with hands that stole it, propitiating the sanctuary with the sound of cymbals and timbrels, and with peace offerings of every kind. It was God whose generalship won this victory for our fathers, because they placed no trust in their right arm or their weapons, but committed to him the decision of the issue. When the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, he's got cherub in his name, and he kind of sounds like Seneca the cherub from Assyria. When the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, brought all Asia with him and encamped round this city, did he fall by human hands? Wasn't it when those hands were unarmed and raised in supplication that an angel of God in one night destroyed that innumerable army, so that when he arose in the early morning, the Assyrians found 185,000 dead corpses and fled with the survivors from unarmed Hebrews who attempted no pursuit? You know, too, of the bondage in Babylon, where the people lived in exile for 70 years and never tried to shake off the yoke till Cyrus granted them liberty as an offering to God. They were sent on their way by him to reestablish the temple worship of their ally. In short, on no occasion did our fathers succeed by force of arms or fail without them after committing their cause to God. If they remained still, they were victorious as it seemed good to their judge. If they gave battle, they were beaten every time. Now think about this, right? So what the Romans are doing here is that they're conquering the nation, right? They're destroying their country. They're destroying their kingdom. But they are making these pitch that they are trying to preserve their nation. So this is the idea that this is a pact of protection, right? Because the behavior of these people compared to any other people they've ever conquered before, because Germans, we didn't fucking when it came to the Romans are coming, every German fucking stopped fighting and they assembled. Right? Because Odin was still at full force, and Thor was still at full force, and Tyr was in his waning, but still a tremendous influence. Because Tyr had to get lost with Fenrir among the Romans in this manifestation of the mythos. He fucking said it in the book. Josephus talked about the right hand. And I said, do not forget that. That's an allusion to Tyr. This little nation is Fenris. It's like they're like an evil autistic child having a 24-hour tantrum about everything that their primary operating system is insulted by. Right? And these are the radicals that are all over the Likud party in Israel. And it becomes the torment of very good fucking people. Very good people. And we're getting really fucking tired of it. Because you keep forgetting. We want to stop it, but also they're not worth dying for ourselves. And we don't feel pretty good about the growth rate of the population of our kind right now. Because many of our women have very, very high standards and do not have the impulse for maternity in them. They are trying to suppress them as a Fenrir in the Eternal Maiden. Right? It's Madonna is the crone now, and she's been a maiden her entire fucking life, and now she looks like a freak because it's unnatural. This is why I love the movie The Substance. Right? This is why I'm reading this book. I'm trying to talk to someone's goddamn fucking shadow. Trying to help! Because y'all need to fucking figure out where the psychopath is in your midst. And you gotta fucking break out of your dogma. Otherwise, you might as well be the psychopath. Because even if it's not your fucking rabbi, it's some fucking crazy motherfucker who somehow has influenced the rabbi. Even though he wants nothing to do with status or something other than the ear of the rabbi. A worm tongue among your own. In short, on no occasion did our fathers succeed by force of arms or fail without them after committing their cause to God. If they remained still, they were victorious, as it seemed good to their judge. If they gave battle, they were beaten every time. For instance, when the king of Babylon was besieging this city, and our king Zedekiah, disregarding Jeremiah's prophecies, gave battle, he was taken prisoner himself and saw the town and the temple razed to the ground. Yet how moderate that king was compared to your leaders and his subjects compared to you. Jeremiah shouted from the housetops that they were hated by God for their iniquities against him, and would be taken into captivity unless they surrendered the city. Yet neither king nor people put him to death. But you, I will say nothing of happening in the city. I have no words to describe the atrocities you have perpetrated, but when I appeal to you to save yourself, you greet me with howls of execration and showers of stone, enraged at by reminded of your sins and unable to endure any mention of the outrages you openly commit day after day? Again, when Antiochus Epiphanes was blockading the city and had committed gross sacrilege, and our ancestors advanced in arms against him, what happened? They were cut to pieces in the battle. The plot was plundered by the enemy, and the sanctuary was desolated for 3 years and a half. Need I go on with the story? But who enlisted the Romans against our country? Wasn't the impiety of the inhabitants responsible? And what began our servitude? Wasn't it civil strife among our ancestors when the insane rivalry of Aristobulus and Hyrcanus brought Pompey against the city, and God put beneath the Romans' heel those who did not deserve to be free? After 3 months' siege, they surrendered, though they had not sinned against the sanctuary and the law as you have done, and were far better equipped for war. And we know the end of Antigonus, son of Aristobulus, don't we? In his reign, God, by a father, capture of the city, smote the people for their iniquities. Herod, Antipater's heir, brought Saucius and Saucius, a Roman army. Is that like a... Oh, I'm sorry, brought Saucius. Antipater's heir brought Saucius, and Saucius a Roman army. He's just saying that there's a link. I thought there was like 2 people named Saucius, and he was just going to leave it at that. Punctuation. Which blockaded and besieged them for 6 months, till, as the punishment of their sins, they saw the city captured and plundered by their enemies. Thus, it was never intended that our nation should bear arms, and war was inevitably ended in defeat. It is the duty, I believe, of those who dwell on holy ground to commit all things to the judgment of God, and to scorn the aid of human hand whenever they can reach the ear of the heavenly judge. But which of the things blessed by the lawgiver have you done? Which of the things cursed by him have you left undone? How far those who were defeated in earlier days fell off of your impiety. You have not eschewed the secret sins, theft, treachery, adultery. In plundering and murder you vie with each other. You open up new avenues of vice. The temple has become a sink for the nation's dregs, and native hands have polluted the hallowed spot that even Romans venerated from a distance, setting aside many of their own customs from regard for your law. Which, that's a very, very important thing. To understand that something was going on, especially in the Roman military, to set this circumstance. And so that'll be an interesting kind of historical anecdote. I want to get to the end of this. I think I might do the live stream a couple minutes longer to look into it. After all this, do you expect him you have dishonored to be your ally? You are indeed righteous suppliants, and in it with clean hands that you beseech your helper. With such hands, no doubt our king made supplications for aid against the Assyrian, when in one night that mighty army was struck down by God. Are the Romans behaving so like the Assyrians that you can expect a like vengeance on them? Isn't the truth that whereas he received money from our king on the understanding that he would not sack the city and then descended on us in defiance of his oaths to burn the sanctuary, the Romans are only demanding the customary tribute which our father paid to theirs. When they obtain this, they will neither sack the city nor lay a finger on your holy places. They will give you everything else, the freedom of your children, the security of your property, and the preservation of your holy law. It is madness to expect God to treat the just as he treated the unjust. Again, he knows how to take immediate vengeance when there is need. Thus, on the very night the Assyrians pitched their camp by the city, he crushed them. So, if he had judged our generation worthy of liberty, or the Romans of chastisement, he would immediately have fallen upon them as he fell upon the Assyrians. Oh, by the way, I want to make a little point here. So, I showed you the mythological, archetypal emergence of the symbolism of what is being demonstrated in this scenario. Now, this doesn't have to make Israel special that it's in this situation. But because of the real reasons, the occult reasons why they want this fucking land, that all of these poor people are being manipulated by, and then their agents go into the world begging for influence to their aid in this thing, and for some strange reason we're all terribly invested in it, and we're just like, why isn't it not just okay to let two people that can't stand each other's existence do a thing? And like, if one of them gets wiped out, one of them gets wiped out, right? Because, man, you got to look at, like, how the hell you're treating each other. Can you start by maybe treating each other better? Because I don't see either of you as defendable people. Right? And I am trying to take care of my own things. I don't want to look under a microscope at Jewish and Palestinian fucking lifestyles right now to get the fucking nitty gritty. But I'm giving you this so you understand that there's the idea of what's going on in the nitty gritty. Andor's the same thing. What the fuck's going on in the nitty gritty? You know what the fuck this is? This is Pluto and Aquarius doing its thing. This is good shit. This is Pluto and Aquarius shit. Because everybody's now saturated into the logistics operations. It's just like, wait a minute, how's this thing in LA logistically happening? And how is the politics this surreal in this demonstration? And why does it just simply seem like more raw theater, but then will surprise you with something significant happening like 3 months later? I don't fucking know. I don't fucking know. And I hate that at the end of the day, it's just, we have to feel misery about some really loose sources about what's going down. And it's just like, there's just a whole lot of, I hate them so much that they have to die, And that, is really all that's swimming in your head, because pride out of the fact that you lost an argument, right? And maybe the other side is wrong and you know it, but that means nothing if you don't have the words to defend it. And it means nothing if you can't realize that you're using the wrong words to defend it. And sometimes your enemy has to mock and shame you and meme you to fucking death to hope that you learn a lesson because of either the attack or the self-defense involved in the engagement. And so this is trollcraft, this is psychological warfare. When Pompey meddled with our affairs, when later Sausius came against us, when Vespasian was laying Galilee waste, last of all, when Titus was but now drawing near the city and met Magnus and Sausius, not only suffered no setback, but took the city by assault. Vespasian made his war against us the stepping stone to the throne. While Titus, for Titus, the very springs flow more abundantly, springs that had dried up for you. Before his advent, you know that Siloam was falling, as were all the springs outside the town, so that water had to be bought by the pailful. But now they are in such full blood for your enemies that not only for them and their beasts, but even for gardens there is more than enough. The same portent you saw happen once before at the capture of the city, when the Babylonian, already referred to, marched against it, took the city and temple, and burnt them both. Though that generation was surely guilty of no such impiety as yours, so I am sure the Almighty has quitted your holy places, and stands now on the side of your enemies. Why, when a good man will quit a licentious house and abominate its occupants, do you think God can endure the wickedness of his household, God who sees each hidden thing and hears what is wrapped in silence? But what do you wrap in silence or keep hidden? What have you not paraded before your enemies? You boast of your unspeakable crimes and daily vie with one another, who can be the worst, as proud of your vices as if they were virtues. And we saw all that being demonstrated before. If it's a lie, if it's a distraction because Josephus is a politician, then the only thing behind that is this fucking issue of the gods. Right? Because, they're trying to rationalize it in their heads. Right? It's trying to lay down a psyche that works for them. The Romans didn't have to fucking do this with anybody else. Right? But, you're talking about a lot of this resistance is coming from the monotheistic, right? There's henotheistic Jews and there's monotheistic Jews in here, right? And that's pretty much the whole population. Jews that, believe that their God is the one true God, where, the Romans are just like, well, Jehovah's just the badass because, we back Jehovah and look how big our empire got. He's the big dog. Right? That's not the attitude of the monotheist. The monotheists are just like, no, these are all fallen angels and demons. devils, things of this nature, right? Versus the other Hebrews who were just kind of, they were just extremely exclusive, wanting to have a certain degree of privacy, through the exclusionaries of their practice, and was not interested in many of the affairs of the world. And because in Ireland there's the mysterium of the Druids, the propaganda of those who came in and intervened in bloodlines of kings at a certain point changed the messaging to de-paganize England before the Church of England came in. This is stuff that they've been working on their minds in such a way is to not is to lie to the people that the Druids were the super good guy crypto Jews, right? Which has been a narrative to help with cognitive dissonance for normies, right? This is this is what George Lucas was alluding to when he showed you the Jedi Order, right? The Jedis who, sure, they were operating on the light side of the Force, but they'd become so goddamn bureaucratic that they forgot to be active participants in the Force. But that was also because they were at a time where the underlying principle of life growth, development, and all these things was about to get flipped on its script on the attitudes of the people in that fucking universe. And that's why they ended up serving the dark side out of these needs. And Palpatine being the worm tongue of the Senate. Thus, he being it. Wonder how many people Palpatine psychically controls. See, that could have been something awesome. That could have been like an Andor Season 3 plot arc or something. Fucking Andor has to fucking spy on the Emperor. That would be the sickest fucking shit. Think about how sick that shit would have been. Fuck you, Disney. Alright. In spite of all, a way of salvation still remains if you will follow it, and the Almighty is ready to pardon those who confess and repent. So this is it's a little insulting when you think about it. Here's a Roman speaking on behalf of their God, saying that, listen, we're Romans, but we understand how your God works. Hey, what's up, Tim Timony? You obdurate fools. Throw away your weapons. Take pity on your birthplace at the moment plunging to ruin. Turn round and gaze at the beauty of what you are betraying. What a city. Right? He's trying to tell them, look, be proud of your goddamn fucking civilization. I want to know what the word obdurate means. Give me a second. Okay. Oops. Obdurate. Not changing in response to argument or the or other influence. Obstinate or intractable. Hardened in wrongdoing or wickedness. Stubbornly impenitent. Hardened against feeling. Hard-hearted. I like this word. Obdurate. See, this is why I read books. Every time you learn a word like that, you get an upgrade. You've now unlocked something in your vocabulary that helps you take ideas and convey them with more value. What a temple, what gifts from all the Gentile world. Against these will any man direct the flames. Right, so the Romans are really trying to sell, dude, we're trying to save your nation, your God. Like, this is the sales pitch. Right? It's like the Jews are about the Holocaust themselves. Does any man wish these things to pass away? What better deserves to be kept safe than these, you inhuman, stony-hearted monsters? Oh, look at that. Stony heart, just like the word that he chose to use, obdurate. He probably made an inference to use that word. If the sight of these things leaves you unmoved, at least pity your families and let each man set before his eyes his wife and children and parents, so soon to perish by famine or the sword. I know that danger threatens my own mother and wife, a family of great promise and a house famous from of old. And perhaps you think it is for their sake I advise you, kill them. Take my flesh and blood as the price of your salvation. I, too, am ready to die if thereby you can learn wisdom. See, this is the Romans putting moral superiority on the Jews. It's just like, this is just, this is their, just like, come on, be cool. Just be cool. We're ready to be cool. God damn, you guys can fucking fight. And we're not that inhumane. Right? Now maybe this is something that the Romans, maybe civilization didn't know that a powerful kingdom could be so deprived when you're effectively found really good, potentially honest gestures coming from your enemy, right? And it's still insulting because you feel that there's no reason for them to conquer you. When they know there's an Ottoman Empire situation that might be emerging over here. You've got a whatchamafucket, the Tartarians emerging in Mongolia. And no, they didn't take over the world, but they were a missing element. I think that they had some fucking tech for a little while in the beginning until they switched from to Lamaism. And I think after Lamaism, they occulted all of their fucking tech that was part of their contribution to the various aspects of how the grid used to be for that period of time. And maybe it wasn't a super wild thing. It might be a little bit more subtle than we think, but it could explain a handful of very interesting anomalies of artifacts. You'll notice that there's a lot of genuine artifacts out there with anomalies, and they're typically not in museums for some reason. They don't want to put a lot of the anomalous artifacts in museums because it's like they can't fucking accept it. And so, like, this is what they do. with the Smithsonian Institute, right? Which, it's a contracted private organization that serves at the pleasure of the government, and is highly, highly edited by what we understand as the, quote, deep state. And some people, I think, don't like hearing that because they're big government type people. And so you say deep state, and you just hear like, he wants to take away one of our protective regulations to make sure our truth is the most believable of things. That's all that's going on. It's so cognitively dissonant. It was the big program that was run through the head of the baby boomer, because they flipped that fucking script on people, and took away the arts. They took away a lot of things in the 1950s, because they standardized education before. It was step one before they came to the point of the Department of Education, because they confided with the military and military intelligence and said, the future of our institutional protection from communism is going to be the education of our kids in a way that is competitive with the Soviet Union. And so that was a ruse, because communists were in place in the Democrat Party by that point, that was shaping policy. And this was acceptable because the Democrat Party needed to find a parallel ideology to what they were going for with the Ku Klux Klan. So they put on the hoods, or they took off the hoods, and they said to themselves, oh, communism. Yeah, like the way we ran the plantations. Yeah. We're going to wreck the economy, and the kids are going to fucking love it. And eventually we came to the 70s. And everything got fucking wrecked. And then the 70s looked like a grindhouse horror. Like, the whole decade to me is just grindhouse horror and way too many drugs. Destructive drugs. Right? But it was the time where the shadow came out. The rainbow kind of belched forth, but a lot of it was beautiful. But it also was reaching its feverish self-destruction. And so we went into kind of like a sort of... We went into some sort of a crash, right? Because although things were going great at the top of the country, a lot of people just destroyed their own neighborhoods. White flight made a massive difference, and it wasn't because people were racist, but it was because it was a horrible way of doing something good for blacks at that time. Because we were not doing well, like, we were lying to ourselves about the cause and the nature yet still. And a little bit of that rises again. I think that we need to remember that we are condemning to life trauma projection of our forefathers. The family curse. What your grandfather did projects onto the father, projects onto the son, projects onto his son, right? Certain ways that you're just going to inertly be like, the child has done this, I treat him like that. Fuck context. I am right about this, no matter what the fuck the situation actually is. This horrible illusionary posture of feeling like you're doing the right thing because it will be seen obviously as the right thing, and that's okay, and thus I don't have to fucking pay attention to real rights and wrongs, is what fucks up people beyond compare when you have power and no accountability. And so this is people's imaginations of the Caesar. This is people's imaginations of the head and privileged rabbis, like the ones mentioned in the prior chapter describing the manner in which they worshipped. So this is a sobering process, right? Okay. Now, give me a second here. What did I say I was looking for? Oh, it was Roman. It was a Roman thing. What was it? One sec. I'm going to do this. Okay. What? That's what it is. What? Okay. Who put the influence of Jewish worship? Who put the influence of Jewish worship into the Roman army? All right, let's see. I'm asking Chat GPT. I'm gonna ask AI. I'm gonna see how AI vibes with what I'm talking about. You know what? I think I could do this. Give me a second. We're having a little bit of fun. Window. Let me see if I can. I think I should be able to do this. Yes. Select. Here we go. I think that works. Oh, I have to bring that to the front, don't I? 1 second. I gotta move it up. Bang! I'm good. Okay. Let's line it up a little bit better. ChatGPT. Thank you. Here's ChatGPT's answer. The influence of Jewish worship on the Roman army likely... Let me show you exactly how I phrase my question. Who put the influence of Jewish worship into the Roman army? The influence of Jewish worship on the Roman army likely occurred gradually and through multiple channels rather than being the result of a single person's actions. However, there are historical factors that contributed to this phenomenon. Jewish communities in the Roman Empire, as Jewish communities existed throughout the Roman Empire, including in places where Roman soldiers were stationed. Some soldiers would have encountered Jewish religious practices, dietary laws, and Sabbath customs. Yes, but but you weren't really converting back then, because I think it didn't have... It's interesting to think about. I'm sure there's just the underground of it, and does that go up through the leadership? Is that how that works? Anyway, conversions and God-fearers. Some Roman soldiers and civilians became God-fearers. Gentiles who respected and sometimes partially adopted Jewish religious practices without fully converting. This was especially true in places like Syria, Egypt, and Judea. You know, it's entirely possible that sort of young people, if these young people happen to be meeting Jewish people before they're of age where they're making any allegiances to the empire. They may have their private allegiances. So these are like, which is perfectly allowed, but, you've got what you do in the Roman army, and it's not entirely clear if we're talking about whether they're henotheistic, which I'm going to ask that question if it's not answered later, because the machine has spit out more word salad at me. All right. This was especially true in places like Syria, Egypt, and Judea. Stationing in Judea. Roman legions stationed in Judea after the Roman conquest of 63 BCE onward, which is right now where we're reading, roughly, would have interacted directly with Jewish society. Over time, some Roman officers and administrators showed interest in Jewish customs, including the figures such as Tiberius Julius Alexander, a Roman Jewish descent, who became a prominent general and procurator of Judea. See? That gives me a lead to play with. As long as I am not a lazy researcher and rely only on ChatGPT as a source, I just have to make sure I source the source, right? I always play with the Three of Swords when it comes to research. Three of Swords energy. Remember that. The role of early Christianity. As Christianity emerged from Judaism in the 1st century, monotheistic and ethical elements of Jewish worship influenced Roman soldiers who converted to the new faith. Early Christian soldiers may have carried some Jewish practices with them. If you had a specific period, person, or practice in mind, such as circumstances, Sabbath observances, or synagogue attendance, I can give you more. Okay. When did okay, what about Romans who became henotheistic? Second. There we go. Ooh, it told me it was a great question. Henotheism played an important transitional role in Roman religious thought, especially in the context of interactions with Jewish monotheism and later Christian theology. 1. Definition of henotheism. Henotheism is the belief in and worship of one God while not denying the existence of other gods. It often acts as a bridge between polytheism and monotheism. Roman henotheism background. While the Roman state religion was traditionally polytheistic, many Romans, particularly among the educated and philosophical elite, began to gravitate towards more abstract supreme deity ideas. Key influences include Stoicism and Neoplatonism. Philosophical schools promoted belief in supreme, rational divine principles, sometimes equated with Zeus, Jupiter, or a universal logos. The cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, especially during the 3rd century CE, emperors like Aurelian promoted Sol Invictus as a supreme deity. This cult is henotheistic in nature, placing one god above others but not denying their existence. And Sol Invictus has mythos comparable to the resurrection mythos of the Christ. Mithraism, a popular mystery religion among Roman soldiers that emphasized a high god and spiritual hierarchy with Mithras as central heroic figure. Though not Jewish, it was deeply syncretic and leaned towards henotheistic themes. Henotheism in Judaism. When Romans were exposed to Jewish worship, especially in Judea or the diaspora, they encountered a strict monotheism unlike their own tradition. Some were attached to Jewish ethics, the notion of a single sovereign God as a result. Certain Roman thinkers and soldiers adopted henotheistic views, blending Roman religious tradition with admiration for the Jewish God, often without fully converting. These individuals may have respected Jewish customs, Sabbaths, and dietary laws without joining the Jewish community. These are often referred to historically as God-fearers. Greek theosabius or phobumenoi ton theon. Can I get a grade from Dr. Hillman on my Greek? I'd like a grade, sir. 4. Precursor to Christian belief. Henotheism among Romans smoothed the path for conversion to Christianity, which upheld monotheism but was more open to Gentile converts. Many early Christian converts, including Roman soldiers, were likely henotheists first, before fully embracing monotheistic Christianity. Notable examples. Tiberius Julius Alexander, mentioned earlier, a Roman official of Jewish heritage, one abandoned Jewish religious idea. It's given me a lot of shit to this answer. It didn't have to go balls deep like this. With an empire increasingly influenced by monotheistic and henotheistic thought, before his conversion to Christianity, he endorsed Sol Invictus, a form of henotheistic worship. Let me know if you're exploring a specific person. Okay, cool. All right. Who by name was the first Roman officer who became a Jewish monotheist? Was the first Roman officer who became a Jewish monotheist? Let's just see if my large language model is going to behave on this question. The earliest named Roman officer known to have embraced Jewish monotheism without fully converting to Judaism is Cornelius the Centurion, described in the book of Acts, New Testament, chapter 10. He is a key historical figure because rank Roman centurion, commander of 100 soldiers in the Italian cohort stationed at Caesarea Maritima in Judea. Okay, Caesarea, we all know about Caesarea and its place in this war. Period is the early 1st century CE, 30s and 40s, right? So we're already past that. He was like Herod's time. Faith described as a God-fearer, phobumenos ton theon, a Gentile who worshipped the God of Israel, prayed regularly, gave alms to the poor, followed aspects of Jewish monotheism without full conversion. Without full conversion. All right. Did he have all of his penis? Serious question. I'm going to ask that question if it's not answered. According to Acts 10, Cornelius received a vision from God, after which he invited the apostle Peter to his home. When Peter preached the gospel, Cornelius and his household received the Holy Spirit, marking him as the first Gentile convert to Christianity. But prior to this, he was already a Jewish monotheist in practice, though not ethnically or ritually Jewish. So he kind of needed Peter to seal the deal. Why Cornelius matters in Jewish-Roman history. He represents the growing influence of Jewish ethical monotheism among Roman officers and soldiers in the eastern provinces. His case is the earliest named example of a Roman military officer moving away from Roman polytheism towards Jewish belief in one God. Cornelius and others like him are sometimes considered part of the God-fearer phenomenon, which helped lay the foundation for the spread of monotheistic ideas in the Roman world, especially among military and urban elites. Gotta tell you, man, this AI in conversation like this works for me a lot better than the uncanny fucking valley that I get half the time from the entertainment side of AI. Anyway, if you're asking about someone who converted fully to Judaism rather than remaining a God-fearer or becoming a Christian, sources are much scarcer. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why. Roman conversions to Judaism did happen, but names are rarely recorded, especially among officers. Most records come from Jewish, Christian, or later Roman legal sources. Interesting. Often focused on bans against such conversions rather than detailed biographies. So it's kind of like the criticism of doing the act instead of the information about doing the act. Let me know if you want a deeper dive into that side, like Roman laws against conversion or evidence from Talmudic or archaeological sources. Okay, very cool. Let me see. All right. Who was the first Roman officer to be fully Jewish? Oh, okay, all right. Who was the first Roman officer to be circumcised? Fuck it. Who was the first Roman officer to be circumcised in Jewish conversion? There we go. There we go. The AI should have the context of the prior conversation. I don't have to repeat myself. There is no surviving historical record that definitively names the first Roman officer to be circumcised in full conversion to Judaism, but here's what we do know. Roman officers converting to Judaism included circumcision did happen, even among Roman soldiers and officers, but they were rare and often discreet due to Roman societal stigma, political pressure, and later imperial bans on conversion. Under Hadrian, in fact. So the 1st and 2nd centuries, there was increasing tension between Rome and Jews, especially after the Jewish revolts, making conversion politically dangerous. During Cassius Dio and others preferred Gentiles converting to Judaism. Let me skip some of this stuff. Josephus here mentions Gentile converts, but doesn't give names of Roman officers who underwent circumcision. Okay, Talmudic literature, such studying Torah, but again, no, Roman law against it. The Edict of Hadrian, first Roman officer to be circumcised, okay. All right, then I'll ask this question. Who was the first Roman senator to be circumcised this way? There is no known historical record in Roman, Jewish, or Christian sources that names a Roman senator who underwent circumcision to convert to Judaism in antiquity. However, we can examine what we do know about conversion to Judaism by Roman elites, possible but hidden. Ooh, am I about to get conspiracy theories from ChatGPT? Oh, that's cool. I'm almost done. I think this is my last question. Thank you so much for being here, Nit. Ancient authors, Jewish, Josephus, Roman Tacitus, and Christian sometimes reference Gentiles converted to Judaism, but they never name a Roman senator who was circumcised. Even Roman aristocrats sympathetic to Jewish monotheism generally did not convert publicly, largely due to political risk and cultural stigma. Tacitus and Juvenal's references to elite converts. Because you got to remember, circumcision is fairly unique to Abrahamism, and then a lot of other cultures changed to be in solidarity with them. Ugh. Tacitus, they're lying about the tip of your dick getting fucking diseases for having that. Just wash it. Just wash it. Just tug on it to expose the head and wash it. And then tuck it back in. That's it. That's all you have to fucking do. Don't be a dirty bitch. Fuck, man. That's all you have to fucking do. We do extreme fucking surgeries over nothing. The worst among the people, the refuse of others, learn to despise the gods, renounce their fatherlands, and attach themselves to Jewish rites. The customs are observed by the most depraved. This is heavily biased and anti-Semitic, but it shows conversions, even among elites, were known if scorned. Juvenal, a Roman satirist, mockingly described a Roman father converting to Judaism and circumcising his son, implying elite adoption of Jewish practice, but again, no names are given. under Emperor Domitian, prosecutions were brought against people suspected of Judaizing, including some from the senatorial class. Flavius Clemens, cousin of the emperor, executed in 95. All right. So instead of speculation, I'm going to skip all that. When did we start keeping records of circumcision of political leaders in the Roman Empire or after? Okay, that's the best way I can phrase it. Okay. Records of conversion to Judaism were extremely rare in the Roman Empire in late antiquity, and there is no systematic or official documentation of circumcision. Here's a timeline. Okay, no, I don't need that. 6th century, shift to Christian, Jewish conversion. It's like there's the assumption if you say you're a Jew, then you're circumcised, right? But it's very interesting that none of this is saying, well, listen, if they claim that they're Jewish, you should assume that they're circumcised. Right? You would think it would be that simple. In Islamic empires where circumcision was also practiced, though not required at conversion, some court records or biological texts may mention elite conversions, but again, rarely focus. Okay, Jewish rabbinic texts from the medieval period onwards. Responsa literature, legal. Example, Obadiah, Norman proselyte, a Christian monk and nobleman who converted Judaism, was circumcised. His story was preserved in Jewish Station. Okay, thank you. All right. So that's a name, Obadiah. And he was a Norman. So this was a Viking type dude who betrayed the old gods. 12th century? Yeah. 12th century, you picked a fucking side. Fuck you, motherfucker. I hope you like your clip dick. Anyway. Rare, occasionally documented in the modern period. Okay. Well, so, that's very, very interesting. Do Jews say that... I'm sorry, okay. Because this is also a thing with Christians too, right? Do Christians, Jews, and Muslims say usually our people are circumcised? Just that they say it, right? Do Christians, Jews, and Muslims say usually our people are circumcised? All right, let's see if he understands this question. Yes, Jews, traditions or cultural expectations around circumcision, but their reasons, timing, universally various. Right, okay, Jews, our people are circumcised, yes, universally. Circumcision, the Brit Milah, is a core commandment in Judaism. Core. Performed on the 8th day after birth. It is considered covenant with God, all Jewish males, even secular or non-religious Jews. All right. Muslims. Our people are circumcised. Yes, nearly universally. Circumcision or khitan, right? So this is the born, right? Christians, our people are circumcised. Depends on the religion and tradition, right? I think that's the best. Ooh, wow. Thank you, but I think I'm done. Okay, guys, that was just a little bonus at the end of this chapter. Thank you so much. I will catch you guys later.